So all we're going to do here is walk through an example problem involving complex numbers, and this asks us to find cosine of pi over 12 and sine of pi over 12 using complex numbers. And the way we're going to do this is using cis form. So we're going to make a complex number z that is cosine of pi over 12 plus I sine of pi over 12. And then we can rewrite this as cis of pi over 12. And the reason we're doing this is because we can use the product properties of cis format in order to break this up into something that we actually know the values for, because we don't know what cosine of pi over 12 is. So we can rewrite this as cis of 4 pi over 12 minus 3 pi over 12, because that is just cis of pi thirds minus pi fourths, and that's something that we know how to find. We can find cosine and sine values for each of those angles. So then this will then further get broken up into cis of pi thirds times cis of negative pi over 4. So then all we're going to do is expand this to cosine of pi thirds plus I sine of pi thirds multiplied by cosine of negative 4 pi fourths plus I sine of negative pi fourths. So then next I'm just going to plug in all of these values for cosine and sine, and then factor and simplify it some. Okay, so at this point we know that the cosine of pi over 12 plus I sine of pi over 12 equals the root 2 over 4 plus root 6 over 4 plus root 6 over 4I minus root 2 over 4I. So what we can do is just equate the real and imaginary parts. Since these two have to be equal, we know that cosine of pi over 12 equals root 2 plus root 6 over 4, and sine of pi over 12 equals root 6 minus root 2 over 4. So when we have abnormal angles like cosine of pi over 12 and sine of pi over 12, this is how we use complex numbers to figure out what those angles are.